Craig Gottwals is our guest. Craig, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Michael. Glad to be here.
Your website is benefitrevolutionblogspot.com?
That's right, .blogspot.com. Or you could just get there at craiggottwals.com, too.
Yeah, who's going to be able to spell Gottwals? Come on.
2 T's, 1 L, man. It's counterintuitive.
I don't even know what that means.
I got no ceilings, I got no floors, but I got walls.
I like it. Nice. So story comes out, Obamacare program costs $50,000 in taxpayer money for every American who gets health insurance, says bombshell budget report. So let's start here. In order to pass Obamacare, legislators played all kind of tricks to get the law under $1 trillion, supposedly. But now, I mean, it's not that long. It's not that much later. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office, has revised that estimate. So where are we today?
Latest revision just came out this month, and they're still playing little games because they're at $1.993 trillion. They just don't want to put a 2 up in front of there yet.
Well, that's real nice. That inspires me. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, to tell you that story, I got to tell you this one, and that's that to get it under $1 trillion. One of the tricks they played was such a lie. It was shameful they could even pull it off because there's been a budget trick, if you will, going on since the late 90s with Medicare. And in essence, what it said was, hey, if we couldn't rein in the growth of Medicare, we're just going to start automatically cutting what we pay doctors starting in the early 2000s, and we're just going to cut it by X percent every single year until we get it down to a certain number.
And they won't mind.
Well, you're right, and they won't mind. Well, essentially what happened was, of course, nobody did anything about it, and they just kept kicking the can down the road and delaying that cut because first started under Clinton, and then it went to Bush, and then it went to Obama, and they never actually put in those cuts on Medicare. Well, those cuts on Medicare are now, if they were to phase in now, would be something in the range of 25% that you'd be cutting the doctors, which, of course, you could never do because we already don't pay doctors enough. And you'd have all kinds of old people without doctors, and old people vote, and politicians couldn't do that. So, but in the passage of Obamacare back in 2009, when they were working on it, they built into the law the assumption that, oh yeah, we're going to phase in those cuts to doctors. And so, of course, part of what we're going to do to save money to pay for Obamacare is we're going to end up paying doctors 20 to 25% less because that's the law that's phased to kick in. Of course, not putting any weight on the reality that those cuts have been there for 10, 15 years, and they just keep getting – nobody's going to ever actually implement them. But that was part of the games they played to get this thing under $1 trillion. And then, of course, once they passed it, they immediately kicked the can down the road again on the doctor cut. The doctor fix is what you'll hear.
So let's make sure people understand this. The law was to be under $1 trillion, and now we're already at $2 trillion.
That's exactly right.
And you have estimated that by 2020 we'll be at $2.5 trillion?
Yeah, 2.5, if not 3. It'd be my best guess at this point, my crystal ball.
So what does the CBO say this will do to our uncovered population?
Well, that's another really interesting thing because you can look at 2 different numbers as you talk about that. The first one is to say, well, look, if you just look at uncovered population last year, 2014, we had 42 million people uncovered. In 2025, 10 years from now, and this is CBO math, they're saying there will still be 31 million uncovered for a net reduction of 11 million people. Now, so let that sink in. Obamacare and all this gets us a net reduction of 11 million uninsured. Now, to be fair to the people that are supporting the law, you could say, well, you're going to have population growth too, and that's factored in. So, it's probably going to cover something like 25 million people ultimately, 25 million more. But you're still going to have somewhere between 29 and 31 million people uncovered by insurance in 2025, 10 years down the road.
And, oh, by the way, since we're also worried about covering these people with insurance, a goodly portion of these people could afford insurance. They'd just have to give up some other things.
Well, yeah, and a goodly number of these people were affording insurance that was good for them but got canceled off of their plans last year so that they could be thrown over into Obamacare, where some of them don't like the insurance they have now and didn't repurchase.
So Craig Gottwals is our guest. So that means Obamacare is costing us $50,000 per enrollee?
Yeah, that's when you break down the math on the number of bodies that we're going to cover, and you look at the price tag at the net. That's another fantasy here. Is the gross of the bill is $2 trillion, and the government says, yeah, but we're going to, through various fines and taxes, we're going to raise $643 billion, so the net cost is really $1.35 trillion. That's not going to be true either, because you've already seen that they're doing things to soften the individual mandate. They're probably going to soften the employer mandate here. When the unpopular Cadillac tax comes in 2018, they're going to kick the can down the road on that too. Anything that an administration official has to do to his constituency to fine them, he's not going to do, because that costs you votes. And so they keep butchering this thing. So now it's not even the monster they passed. It's some hybrid Frankenstein of what they passed. And you're ultimately going to end up, and that's why I'm pretty confident you're going to end up somewhere between $2.5 and $3 trillion if they let this thing go unchecked as it's headed.
Well, and another point worth making, Craig Gottwals is our guest. What have you seen Obamacare do to employment levels?
Well, it's not helping employment by any means. Just I guess it was a week or two ago, there was a Senate or congressional hearing on this topic, and you had a couple different people testify. And one of what I thought was the most amazing testimonies came from the American Action Forum and Douglas Holtz-Aiken, who used to be the president the director of the CBO. He said that according to their model, as many as 9.8 million Americans are impacted by the Obamacare definition of a 30-hour work week, meaning people were working more than 30 hours and have had their hours cut back just to get underneath that 30-hour level. And again, roughly 10 million people just on that one metric. In your intro, you mentioned the 50-employee number too. And as a refresher for your audience, those are both important numbers. If you're under 50 employees, full-time employees, you don't have to buy Obamacare for your workers. Or if your worker is under 30 hours, you don't have to buy Obamacare for your workers.
So what we're doing with all of these provisions that are claimed to protect the full-time worker are simply making it so that people don't want full-time workers. Craig Gottwals, can you hold with us?
Absolutely.
This is very dry statistical analysis of Obamacare rather than anecdotal evidence. What I'd like to do, if you're interested and you have a question on Obamacare, call us. Let's talk about it. 713-212-5874.
He speaks, you listen, you learn, you laugh, he thanks you. The Michael Berry Show.
New York Times reporting that President Obama, facing angry reprisals from parents and lawmakers from both parties, will drop his proposal to effectively end popular college savings accounts known as 529s, but will keep an expanded tuition tax credit at the center of his college access plan, the White House said Tuesday. The way these things work, you had to see this coming. Barack Obama wants to get free community college. That's a legacy. People will cheer for him when he goes to the colleges again because they somehow think they're going to win from that. So what does he do? To be popular, he gives away your money. Well, this is a standard political ploy. In order to get what he wants, he asks for two things. One, that people will be personally harmed by. The other, they'll be harmed by, but they don't see it quite as much. So they stand up, you can't have this. And he says, oh, okay, all right. I'll tell you what, I'll just take my community college. Okay, but you can't have this over here. It's like when he does a gun grab threat and at the same time wants this or that. and they give him what he wants because the one thing Republicans can't let him do is grab guns, because that's something Republicans will actually get mad about. You can steal their money, and they'll just kind of crib a little bit. But you grab their guns, and they get furious. They'll actually do something about that. So Craig Gottwals is an Obamacare expert, and we were talking about the effect of Obamacare and what we're seeing in companies where once they get to that 50th employee, they don't schedule them past 30 hours because that makes them a quote-unquote full-time employee.
You know, Michael, what you just said in the intro there, it's exactly what's going on with Obamacare, right? We promise you Obamacare, and then there's these things to pay for Obamacare that aren't popular, so we just rip those out and don't enforce them, and that's how Obamacare becomes 2.5 times the cost it was. Same thing's going to happen with that college deal, right? We promise you free college, and we're gonna tax the college accounts to pay for it. Oh, you don't like us taxing the accounts? Well, we'll just not do the tax then, and we'll just borrow the money from China, and now this thing's going to be more expensive than it started off. It's what every politician does, right? They just give away the candy. They don't worry about the broccoli.
And there's no harm to him.
No, he'll be out
because
of office.
The media won't stay on top of it. His core supporters are blacks, college students, and university professors, and they're already in the tank. They're not coming to a reasonable conclusion having studied the facts. They're with him no matter what he does. They either, on one end, don't understand what's going on, or on the other end, are excited about it. Because if you're pissing off the middle class, oh, man, if you're pissing off people that are saving, oh, that's somehow hurting rich people.
Right.
So what about the soft employer costs?
Well,
because there always are going to be.
Absolutely. And, you know, the other thing, you know, this 40-hour work week thing, I want your listeners to understand it's not a theory. I mean, in part of that congressional testimony that occurred last week, the CEO of CKE Restaurants, which I believe is Hardee's and Carl's Jr., fast food chain, he gave the example in testimony. He said, look, this is simple math, folks. 3 employees working 40 hours a week will produce 120 hours of work. But I can just go to 5 employees, have them each work 24 hours per week, and I will get to the same 120 hours of work. However, if I do it that way, I don't have to buy them health care, which could cost me anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 per employee, depending on the health care. And it's a huge tax on the growth of business that I can avoid by keeping all my employees down at 24 hours a week or under 30. But you get the idea.
So within a year or two, companies with over 50 employees are simply going to lay those employees off and hire them back as contractors.
That's one way to take care of it. You're just not going to see companies with, I would assume, 50 to about 80 employees. Those are going to go away because if you can at all reasonably get down in the 40s, you're going to do it.
Well, and then you spin off divisions.
Right.
You spin off divisions. You automate where you can.
Yep.
You find ways to lay people off that are expendable and dispensable. And you know what's so interesting about this? Remember that we're having this conversation, folks, because when it happens, what will we do? People will complain about those evil corporations. And somehow they'll say, Barack Obama, save us from the evil corporations. Barack Obama was the reason that the evil corporation did what it did.
They're just responding economically rationally. You asked about the soft costs. What was stunning to me, too, and this survey, a survey from ADP, which is a giant payroll provider, looking at large employers. So now, again, think about this. When you talk about a large employer, you're talking about more than 100 employees, typically an HR department, typically a compliance officer, certainly attorneys on retainer. So the most capable employers to deal with the bureaucratic morass that's going to be Obamacare, large employers at a rate of 62% said, look, we aren't ready to comply with Obamacare starting in January 2015. We're just not ready for all of the things that we're going to have to do. Now, you stack on top of that Obamacare has whistleblower protections baked into it, meaning if an employee complains about Obamacare, that employee gets elevated to almost a protected class status. You're going to see a lot of problem for employers this year just on the compliance front, and as this knowledge of the whistleblowing rewards leaks out, you're going to see more employees pointing and saying, you screwed up this way, employer, and now you can't fire me because I just whined about it. A statistic that you'll appreciate, Michael, Obamacare right now, when you cobble together all of the pages of regulations and the statute itself, is somewhere between 30 and 40,000 pages, okay? When it's done, if it holds to the same statute to regulation ratio as did Medicare Medicaid, we're looking at roughly 130,000 pages of this thing when it's all done.
Wow. And folks, remember that Barack Obama swore it was not a can you hold with us, Craig?
Sure thing.
Barack Obama swore it was not a tax increase. Swore it was not. And when he learned from Valerie Jarrett that Roberts had sided with him, which shocked everyone, she said Roberts ruled it was a tax. And Obama said, but it's not a tax. Well, but he ruled it was, and that's how he passed it. Look what a massive tax. This isn't about health care. Never was. That's why the IRS is effectively enforcing it. So has it brought down the cost of premiums? You'll find out.